Morning. I'm in a peculiar industry, which is both nonprofit, but it's also a business that impacts tourism, economy, and creates a whole bunch of jobs. So just to give you a perspective, the number of people last year who went to all major league games in the United States was about 434 million. The number of people who went to museums last year was about 850 million. So they are destinations that actually bring in significant dollars to local economies and national economies and so on and so forth. But they're also in a separate niche. So they're away from theme parks, they're away from commercial attractions, and they are in this nonprofit sector, which actually has a different tax connotation. So most of the museums are registered as 501c3s, and when people donate or sponsor museum-related events, they get a tax write-off for some of those expenses. So that sustains the museums. They are glues that keep civil societies together. In Los Angeles, you have some slew of very interesting museums in addition to themed attractions. So does San Francisco. It has about 17, 18 museums that bring in significant tax dollars. And leisure tourism is kind of enhanced because of museums as destinations. So today what I'll do is I'll show you a blitz of slides in very rapid succession. Some of these are projects that I've been involved with personally. And like Judy mentioned, I used to head an exhibit design production studio in Midland, Michigan, not far from Northwood campus. And this organization handled about 25 museum projects, about $45 million of business every year. And they did all the back-end work, including master planning, design, build, engineering, production, procurement, and execution, implementation, and on-site testing. So there's a whole industry that is at the back end of when the museums are created. Once created, there is a maintenance and upgrade requirement, which is a separate business. There are some museums that are profit-making. So some of the prominent examples are the Spy Museum in Washington, D.C. Has anyone been to the International Spy Museum? There's one person there. So that's run by a family that runs a shopping mall complex and a chain, the Mallrite Group. And they make about $30 million a year in profits, and if not more. So the revenue streams with most museums is not just ticket sales, but they also do facility rentals, weddings, parties, special events, and all those, and cafeteria and retail. All those kind of add to that business model to sustain a lot of museums. Some museums also have studios within. So what they do is they bid on commercial jobs at non-commercial rates, and that makes it viable for some museums because they have the expertise. They can lend their consulting services, or they can help lend their sort of design build expertise to set up new exhibits or set up new museums or consult for projects within the United States or overseas. So that is another way that museums are kind of making some extra revenue. With the digital age, the museums have a different monetization model. Some of the new museums and modern museums have woken up to it on the potential of how to monetize using apps. And there's a back-end reservation system called ARES that supports hotel industry and tourism industry, travel industry, bus and logistics, ships and boats, and so on and so forth. So the industry is becoming very sophisticated at the back end, which you normally don't see. There's also geofencing that a lot of museums do. So for example, if you're in the proximity of the Peterson Automotive Museum, for example, you can be geofenced in that area. And that's a very powerful marketing tool that kind of negates all the other attractions and only focuses on that particular attraction and the offerings that it does. So every time you're in the proximity, that pops up. There is also triangulation, which is being experimented with our habits as creatures. We have certain habits for shopping, certain habits for visitation of museums when we are on travel. And the triangulation intelligence or the big data actually allows a curated form of targeting people when they are potentially in a touristy location to say, okay, these are the top 3 museums, and it pops up on your mobile devices and so on and so forth. So the industry has multiple connotations, and I will run through a blitz of slides, and then I will, if I have time, I'll share a little bit about what is happening in San Francisco with the Climate Museum Initiative. So Museums, there are iconic museums. There are single museum complexes. There are museums with a diversity of topics, everything from culinary arts to hair. There are site-specific museums, which is, for example, if you have a dinosaur dig site, it is site-specific. You can't have that museum elsewhere. You're near the dig site or on the dig site, or a site which has historical importance. Then you have museums in mall clusters. For example, the Smithsonian has 12 museums in a 1 mile cluster. San Diego has 7 or 8 museums in a 1 mile cluster. So they actually sort of multiply revenue streams. There are pop-up museums. There are mixed-use museums called bleisure, where business and leisure are combined. Then there are cultural districts. So there are countries that are planning larger cultural districts, which is a residential and a museum and a cultural complex, all in one location. Then there are eco-museums that promote ecotourism. The lifestyle museums, living museums. Living museums have live animals, like aquariums can be living museums and so on. And then you have virtual museums and mobile museums. Some of the industry estimates, as you can see, that China went from 25 museums in 1940s to 3,500 museums in 2015. So it's one of the biggest spurt in museum growth of any country, anytime. Canada, by comparison, at the same time in 20 years, invested a very small amount of money. The United States, not so much. Abu Dhabi, Saudi Complex, and Ferrari World are just 2 projects, and you can see the dollars associated with the spending on just the Ferrari World and Yas Marina, which is about $40 billion, and the Saudi Cultural Complex of 7 museums, about $27 billion. The Grand Egyptian Museum and the Lucas Museum in Los Angeles are in the $1 billion realm. So how did it start? It started off with an architect called Frank Gehry, who created the Experience Music Project. So inspired by Jimi Hendrix and inspired by 4 smashed guitars, that's the sort of mangled complex that came up in the 80s. It has the colors of the 4 electric guitars that were very popular in the 70s, and the crumpled fretboard is actually on the top of the building. So Frank Gehry lives in Santa Monica. He created this museum after having a conversation with Paul Allen, who was the founder of Vulcan Ventures and a co-partner of Bill Gates and founded Microsoft. And he saw a horse head on his desk made with scraps of steel. And he said, well, if you can create something like this, we can call it the blob or a whoosh, and it can shake up downtown Seattle. It's too gray, it's too bland, it's too square. And so this was the result of that, and this became an iconic museum when it opened. It had audio guides, it had a few things that were kind of ahead of its times. And over the years, it has mutated into different things, Museum of Science Fiction, Museum of Popular Culture, and it has added some connotations, and it's still trying to find an identity. But this was the beginning of iconic museums. Bilbao, the same architect, many years later, created the Guggenheim extension in Bilbao, Spain. There was nothing much going on in Bilbao till this thing was planted there. And all of a sudden, the tourism economy and everything else, the first year, I think it hit about $250 million in revenues. By the time it got to year 4, it had exceeded $1 billion in localized revenue and regional employment. And that was called the Bilbao effect. And you can see why that effect was very popular. The building is made of titanium, and it reflects moving clouds in sunlight and kind of seems to change color, and it's kind of dynamic in its presence. The National Museum of Saudi Arabia, so again, creation of an attraction from nothing. They didn't have any collections. They didn't have any notion of what they would put in the museum because most of the traditions were Bedouin traditions or oral traditions. And they hired a Japanese-Canadian architect by the name of Raymond Moriyama to create the National Museum of Saudi Arabia. It was called King Abdulaziz Al Darat Murabba Palace when it opened. And I was in charge of a small section of this project way back, I think in 1996. The same architect, Frank Gehry, created this fashion blob. It's a fashion cloud. This is now constructed. This is just outside of Paris, sponsored by Louis Vuitton. Cesar Pelli, this is the Magic Carpet of Science. It's a Connecticut Science Center. And Judy and I were involved with the same company that actually put all the exhibits inside the Connecticut Science Center When it was built for $155 million. They spent about $80 million in exhibits. And this attraction came up, and all of a sudden now it is a hub for major science conversations and environmental sort of movement in New Haven, that area. This is the Denver Art Museum. Some of you may have seen it. It's designed by Daniel Liebeskind, known for his very striking architectural form. And so the experience was called the eyegasm, if you will. This is the Utah Museum of Natural History, made with local materials. So the local stone and copper are used in the building facade. It has similar sort of very dramatic views on the inside. What makes this interesting is that you see the solar panels on the top right that powers most of the building, but the panels also have some sensors, and the sensors trigger a combination of art forms within the building. And essentially, you see these plant silhouettes grow and wilt depending on the temperature and humidity outside the building. So it kind of attracts people at a different level, so that you're not staring at empty walls. There are things happening on the walls. This is in Mexico City. Some of you may have seen it. It's the privately funded Somaya Museum of Art. It's a twisted toroid. So again, the structure has no pillars in it. It's a toroid, and you can see it's I think very close to a shopping complex, private collection, and pretty much a family enterprise, but a very popular destination that adds to a regular shopping experience in the proximity. This is a really interesting contemporary art space. If your travels take you there, please check it out. Kengo Kuma is one of the leading Japanese architects who's been working on a number of fantastic museum projects in different parts of the world, and this is a project from Scotland, Nestle Chocolates. So again, a destination off of a highway. Looks like a chocolate wrapping, and it's attached to a chocolate factory. So there's a corridor that leads you to the chocolate factory at the back. Korea, this is a International Film Festival museum with a drive-through ability to take your car up. There's a theater up there, and you can see the spiral sort of ramp that takes people up there. The theater experience is a multi-theater complex. The next one is in Israel. It's it's how you take just two cuboids and transform it with 5 ribbons of cotton steel. So the first sculptural element that you experience is the building itself. And again, because the building is kind of open and closed from different sections, it kind of yields sunlight in different directions. It adds to the flavor of the space. Beauty and the Beast. So Jean Cocteau, the hair of the beast, inspired the museum in Monaco. And this is what the private museum looks like. It has a very dramatic facade during the daytime, and at nighttime it is even more dramatic. This is a nighttime shot. So again, a phenomenal sort of attraction in one of the most expensive real estates in the world. New museums that are coming up are equally dramatic. This is in Copenhagen. This is like a dig site. It actually goes several levels underground, and that's a view from the top. That's a view from outside. There's a whole tropical rainforest on the inside, some of the renderings of a very ambitious project. In your hometown right here, you see the power of the Broad. The Broad family has commissioned 2 museums simultaneously. One is in the Michigan State University campus, which is a dramatically different building. And then you have this one here, which has been fairly popular ever since it opened, against all odds. It lets in diffused light, minimizes the use of your regular lighting. Then there are museums on illustration. So this is like pencil points. So this facade looks like pencil points, and it's in Madrid. You can get a sense of what that has done to the art of illustration. This one is the top left, the little cube that you see far on the right, top right there. That's where oil was discovered for the first time in Saudi Arabia. And it was called the Well of Prosperity, or eventually called Well of Knowledge. And this King Abdulaziz Center for Knowledge, it has changed its name a few times, but it's designed by Snohata from Norway. And the building is designed like 3 or 4 pebbles kind of depending on each other and leaning on each other to kind of hold up a cultural construct. So again, a very ambitious project. There are 7 or 8 countries involved in the creation of this particular museum as an attraction. The next one looks like a serpent. It sort of sits on 2 mountains or 2 hills, which was a prehistoric dig site in Korea, South Korea, and designed by a French team. You can see the top left on how it looks like a serpent. And the lighting at night propagates, or seems to sort of give this notion of propagation of knowledge. Museum of Tomorrow. So again, it started in 2015 in Rio de Janeiro, designed by Renzo Piano, the architect. The content has been developed jointly with IRIS, IBM, and that kind of adds a lot of punch to the content areas within the museum. California Academy of Sciences, again designed by Renzo Piano. So it kind of looks like Teletubby Land, but it's a very complex building. $480 million. It's a LEED Platinum, the only LEED Platinum museum building in the United States. But it's also high maintenance. It has a living roof, as you can tell, which is an emulation of the 7 hills in San Francisco. And this is an aerial shot of what it looks like. It's another shot here. And there are some views on the inside. So the reason I've shown you this is as an attraction. There are multiple attractions in the same complex. Same park has the De Young Museum, designed by Herzog and de Meuron. It has the Arboretum, it has a Japanese garden, and it has the California Academy of Sciences. So it is a cluster. You can't do all of them on the same day, but if you're a tourist and if you just want to dip your fingers in all of them, you can, if you like. But that's the sort of beauty of once you're there with your family or friends, you can spend a lot of time absorbing, completely different sort of experiences. The complexes that I've been talking about, this is one of the complexes in Saadiyat off of Abu Dhabi. And they conceived this entire district with multiple museums, residences, and other businesses all in one single cluster as a massive economic driver and as an anchor for culture. It has some of the top architects of the world who have kind of conceived different large museums. The interesting thing is that about 50 years ago, you can see the ruling family and you can see, no shoes. You can see a falcon, because found a falconry on the top right. That's Sheikh Zayed, and the National Museum kind of celebrates what they've achieved in the 50 years or 60 years. These are like the wings of the falcon, but they're actually cooling towers. It's a very ambitious National Museum project. And those are some of the shots from the opening with the Queen Elizabeth and views of the building. Frank Gehry is constructing a museum there as well. And Tadao Ando, who's again a very famous Japanese architect, is conceiving a maritime museum. A third of it is underwater. Zaha Hadid, who was known as the Queen of the Curve, who passed away a few years ago, conceived their sports and stadium complex with 180-degree views of both Dubai side and the Abu Dhabi side. The star attraction that opened most recently is this one. It's designed by Jean Nouvel. And this is a top view. The building is designed like a sand dune, and it's perforated with the Mashrabiyya pattern. So the side view looks like this. And you enter the museum through the lobby, through water. And the sort of punctured pattern on the dune lets loose a rain of light. And that becomes your first painting where you are actually involved in that process as you walk in. So as an attraction, it's one of the pristine sort of attractions. There are other complexes that are being conceived. This is outside of Seoul, Korea. And it's, again, a very ambitious zero-carbon city combo where lifestyle and museums all kind of blend together in a very sort of futuristic complex. Hong Kong is in the middle of revival off of Kowloon. They have some ambitious plans of a cultural district. In fact, I'm heading there in 2 weeks to speak to some of the early planners. And these are some of the shots from museum concepts in China. And you can see how ambitious they are and how massive they are in their scope and scale. This in particular has resonance with Los Angeles as a hub of movie making. This is a team from Europe that has created this sort of complex for cartoon and animation. It's a complex. It has hotels, it has museum, it has rides, it has all kinds of things woven into a very large complex. There are smaller museums, but equally dramatic. This is the Oct Museum in Shenzhen. Inside views. This is the Datong Art Museum, again made of cotton steel to look like bamboo. And again, the scale of planning, it's a very large complex. You can see a sense of, it's 330,000 square feet. And a lot of museums use local materials or recycled materials, and this particular example won the Pritzker Prize. It's located in a town where brick making was the business, and they recycled all the bricks from the kilns, and the texture of the building is actually imbibed from all the recycled materials that they could collect. So for this sort of ambitious, fantastic execution, the 2012 Pritzker Prize went to Guangzhou. This is a very large complex, again designed by Zaha Hadid, and you can see the size and scale of this massive complex, a multi-use complex. The theater space, the inside space, again a phenomenal project that's going to completely revitalize. It has an impact radius of 2,000 miles. This is a project that is unfolding in Egypt, the Grand Egyptian Museum. Again, the scale of the project is dictated by the size of the artifacts. As you can see, some of the gigantic, that's Ramses there, and how that statue was moved with a massive engineering jig. And you can see this massive trailer with 42 sets of wheels taking Ramses through Cairo into this new Grand Egyptian Museum complex. Again, the scale of the complex is really massive. It's over 1.5 million square feet, I think, and it's designed by two young architects who have never designed a museum of this scale or a museum period. And you can see the human scale in comparison to the facade of the building complex that is being proposed. And there is a grand staircase in the middle from where you can see the pyramids, and it is snuck on one side of the Giza Plateau. So it's an homage to sunlight. Cars, because we are in a car-related industry here. Porsche, the Porsche Museum of Design. Again, you can see the sort of power of Porsche design. They also have a design studio in-house, and this kind of gives you a sense of that. Harley Davidson in the United States. So this is the Harley Museum. If you haven't been there, please check it out. And as you know, Harley became a cult and a sort of culture unto itself, and the museum kind of celebrates some of those. Mercedes-Benz in Stuttgart, again, an homage to excellence in automotive engineering and driving. And the mother of all car-related museums and complexes is the Ferrari World. The top left, you can see there was not a blade of grass on Yas Marina, on that island. When I went there, I think in 2005, there was not a blade of grass. We had 4 pegs in a location to park our trailer, construction trailer, and there were 15,000 construction trailers, and there were 37,000 workers on site. And the project was executed in 54 months with a price tag of $40 billion. Some say it's 42, but it's about $40 billion. Many contractors were involved in this process. The entire set of rides was designed in Cincinnati. It was pretty amazing to see how fast this project came up. And it has a Formula One racetrack. It has a hotel complex. It has 12 galleries of a museum. And it has the world's fastest rides. And that's the largest corporate logo you can see from outer space. It is also a brand bubble. So what that means is that in the Ferrari world, you cannot have a KFC or a McDonald's or Starbucks or any other brand. The brand bubble protects every business that is there is Ferrari branded. These are simulators that use confidential Ferrari data sets that puts you through G-forces. Each simulator in those days was $3 million, made by a Dutch company called Cruden. That's the complex. That's the hotel complex. The custom exhibits, each upwards of $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million, and of course, every Ferrari that is there is high dollar worth. Some projects, more than attractions, are a result or a birth of some serious cultural issues. Hawaii is a case in point. Anyone from the Big Island of Hawaii, or anyone who has been there? One. So the Big Island of Hawaii, as you probably may know, holds the world's largest optical telescopes. So because the viewing conditions are pristine, 16 countries have invested money in optical telescopes. And that includes, so on the top left, you can see how the telescopes are dotted. That includes Subaru, Gemini, Keck, NASA IRTF, Caltech, Canada, France, Hawaii, Joint Astronomy Center. So these are some of the bigger telescopes on Mauna Kea. And because this is a science reserve declared by the University of Hawaii, which means restricted access, there is a sort of growing divide between the Hawaiian communities who have holy sites and sacred sites on the mountain versus some of the interests of the astronomy community. And most recently, it has kind of bubbled into a series of legal and other confrontations associated with a National Science Foundation grant for upwards of $1 billion for establishment of a 30-meter super telescope compared to access and other issues associated with it. So those are some of the ceremonial rites that are performed atop the mountain. Those are some of the early drawings of what we were thinking. Our role was to create a mitigation center that educates the astronomers and the Hawaiians on the virtues of human ingenuity of exploring the deep skies, if you will. And the building is designed as a sort of takeoff from the three mountains on the Big Island, Mauna Kea, Mauna Loa, and Hualalai, and the sunken crater is the Kilauea volcanic crater. So that's how it is designed. It's got the titanium cones, construction shots. You get a sense of how it all came together, opening, and it has served its purpose to some degree, but there is more to go in that journey. Santa Barbara Sea Center. So this was the pier had burned down once upon a time, was revived, and there is a wet lab and a sea center created as an extension to the Natural History Museum in Santa Barbara. And most of the exhibits in the wet labs were created in San Francisco. Winemaking, Copia. So this is the American Wine and Food Institute, was financed by Mr. Mundawi when he was alive. And you can get a sense of some of the inside shots. A similar wine museum in Chile, in Santiago, and a wine museum in Bordeaux. So this has transformed Bordeaux's economy because of, first of all, it's had this liquid architecture that looks like a decanter, but also is so iconic that it has sort of spurred the economy and created Bordeaux as an anchor for many things. Tillamook, where the cheese comes from, Tillamook cheese. There's a LEED Gold building that talks about the forest fires and afforestation. So this was a site where there were 3 very large forest fires, and the ash fell in the Pacific Ocean in the 40s and 50s. And then it also unleashed the largest afforestation program with 10 million saplings being planted. And when I was there, the opening, again, it was built by design craftsmen. I was there at the opening. There were firemen who had brought their grandkids, and they had planted saplings 50 years ago. Hong Kong, this is an interesting exhibit. I've mentioned about live exhibits. This has live crocodiles. It's a Borneo peat swamp. So it has husbandry involved, trap rowers, and so on and so forth. It's part of a very large international wetland center in Hong Kong. Artifact specific, this is a submarine. It's in the basement of Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. And we had created, again, at the same company in Michigan, we had created some of these exhibits. Star Spangled Banner, again, an iconic sort of artifact that inspired the American national anthem, was stitched in 1812 by Mary Pickersgill. And it flew over Fort McHenry. It was quite massive. It's the size of almost this room. And it was that big because it had to be seen from a great distance. And after the war was over, it was with General Armistead's family till 1904. The family gave it to the Smithsonian, and until 1964 it remained in the Arts and Industries building, all folded up, and then it was put up in a glass case, half folded out, and then it hung in the lobby of the American History Museum for many years. And then the secretary of the Smithsonian said, well, he called Ralph Lauren Apollo and said, well, your symbol is the flag, and you want to give $15 million to fix it? And he said yes. And so the extensive restoration process began, and it took, I believe, 8 years to restore it, and it's now on display if your travels take you to DC. It's in this bulletproof oxygen chamber. Those are some shots from the chamber when it was under construction, and this is the finished chamber. It has a section of our national anthem, projected at the back, which might seem like a simple thing, but there is no beam, so it's low lumen levels, and there's no beam of light traversing across the gantry, and there's no parallax distortion on the verses on either side, left and right. That's the sort of opening ceremony with President Bush. Many of you may have seen this flag that inspired, of course, many things, including movies, but also a museum, National Marine Corps Museum, and that's in Quantico. And these are some of the battle scenes, again, produced by our company back then. But not everything is big budget. This is a very small budget, but a very powerful museum called Museum of Broken Hearts. It's in Zagreb, and it talks about, of course, broken hearts, broken relationships, and they collect curatorial material from people in shopping malls or in other places, and people share their stories. And it's not just the story of relationships between two people. It's also the balkanization, conflict of war, fight between neighbors and communities that is brought in a very sort of interesting, poignant way inside the very small museum, but a very interesting and powerful museum. It has it blends humor with difficult subjects and poetry and so on and so forth. So for example, when I was there, I saw in a case, I had to kind of look a few times, and there was a little snuff box, and it said magic potion. And at the back of it, it said doesn't work. The building of exhibits is an industry, the back end of it, and I'll give you some glimpse of what it takes to build some of these exhibits. This was our production shop in Michigan. We built a lot of exhibits for Mrs. Mubarak, working on the Suzanne Mubarak Science Exploratory Center in Cairo, Egypt. Again, a multilingual, sort of multidisciplinary exhibits that talk from Mars rover to stem cell to walk through human heart to astronauts. This is outside the Mubarak's office, and this is the complex. And move on to Singapore. So this is a Museum of Science and Art, which is a section of Marina Bay. How are we doing for time? We're doing good for time? Yeah. Okay. So this is an oculus that collects rainwater. If your travels take you to Singapore, you can take a peek. This is a double helix bridge that takes you to Marina Bay Sands. And then there are some other large complexes. This is a living heritage complex in the Himalayan foothills in northern India, designed by Moshe Safdie, who designed Skirball here. You can see the scale of this complex. It's a 100-acre site, 25 galleries, 650,000 square feet. The pedestrian bridge is a quarter of a mile long. The water body is about 7 acres. This is shot at night. And it talks about universalism. So there are museums which don't have artifacts, but it's about ideas. And the human rights, universalism. There are a number of museums that are about ideas, and this is one of them. So it deploys sort of metaphor, simile, vanishing crafts and poetry and hymns to kind of convey the impact of universalism. It's a volumetric space. I'll quickly run through some of these slides. Traditional trades, opening shots, earthquake. So there is a museum complex coming up on a 400-acre site that focuses on a massive earthquake that took many lives. It's a memorial and an earthquake-related museum with a disaster recovery command center in the same location. The building goes up 150 meters alongside a mountain, and the roofing has the seismic folds of seismic activity. It's a human rights museum designed by Antoine Predock in Winnipeg, Canada. And another human rights museum with a different sort of dimension is the Nanjing Massacre Museum. And then, of course, there's another one, which is the National Center for Civil and Human Rights in Atlanta, Georgia. It's like interlocking arms. I'm going to run through the next few slides. They're kind of difficult slides. They're about enactment of Darfur. It's called Still Death. Those are actors getting ready for enactment, and those are some enactment shots. So these are experiences that are in an area from where, if you feel uncomfortable, you can walk away. So it's on a semi sort of open area, so you can walk away from it. But the impact of storytelling is quite powerful. The 911 Museum, if you haven't been there, please check it out. Again, it is aided a lot by your apps. You can actually stand in different vantage points across Manhattan and actually see some footage from back when. I'm going to run past this. And dinosaurs, a very popular topic. So most recently I was building a dinosaur museum up in northern Alberta at a dig site where a specific species of dinosaur was discovered called Pachyrhinoceros lacustae. And again, how do you create an attraction in the middle of nowhere? So it's on Alaska Highway. There's nothing there but canola fields for miles and miles. And but what is important is this is Grand Cache. You can see the dinosaur tracks. There are sauropods, theropods, and the rock surface has shifted at 70 degrees. You can see one of the paleontologists rappelling up, and the snow has settled into the dinosaur tracks. And the idea was to create a museum that emulates the dig site. So the building actually goes under. And we roped in some talent from Los Angeles. So my good friend Dan Aykroyd showed up. He's a motorcycle buff. So he put out a call to bring 1,000 riders in support. And you can see the unbroken chain of motorcycles coming up from Grand Prairie, northern Alberta, to the dinosaur site. You can see all the dinosaurs, all the motorcycles there. And the interesting thing about this museum was that we introduced helicopter rides to fly over the bone bed site. So we introduced an R-44 and Bell South helicopters, which would take off from 2 helipads in that location and fly you over sort of the Jurassic land. Some shots of the opening, helicopter, parking lot, and you can see that's Alaska Highway, and it's pretty desolate. It's oil and fracking country, and one of the problems we experienced was with the Hutterites and Mennonites who don't believe in dinosaurs, and so that was a different sort of engagement so that they would appreciate history for what it is. And these are shots on the inside. It's a combination of local materials and a lot of technology. Marine life here, So we run the Sea Lion Center in San Francisco, and we run the Aquarium of the Bay, which is on Pier 39. Sea lions suddenly started coming to Pier 39 after the Prietoloma earthquake about 30 years ago. And why they started coming is anybody's guess, but the best guess is that they came because of food. And the food with herrings travel to that location because of temperature changes and seismic activity under the ocean. And as a result, they face a number of problems. There is pollution. They ingest microplastics. There is a significant amount of domoic acid, which is a neurotoxin that impacts their brains and disorients them. So it impacts all animals, but you discern more of that in this little marine mammal. And we address a number of issues within the aquarium with the sea lion health as a small lens for climate change, pollution, ocean acidification, sea level rise, etc. And about 1.5 years ago, we embarked on a master plan to transform the aquarium into a climate and ocean conservation living museum. And last October 5th, we had Dr. Jill Biden come there. We unveiled the vision for what we are thinking. And this is the existing building, and this is what the new building would look like. It has some interesting nuances. The building uses California species of microalgae as photobioreactors to generate power. It sits on a microgrid using fish waste. It uses wind, solar, and other sources of energy. It has a deep ocean exploration learn and launch center. It has a tunnel that connects these 2 bubbles. It has a theater space, which is a combination of an industrial space with ROVs and HOVs suspended from the ceiling, and of course, a projection space. This is what the sort of building looks like on Pier 39 and the sort of volumetric dimension. And this is what it looks like from Alcatraz. And this is a combination of both shots. This is coming up in your backyard. It's a $1 billion investment from George Lucas and the Lucas Foundation. And the construction has started. So in 3 or 4 years, you will have a $1 billion museum in LA that focuses, it's called the Museum of Narrative Arts. So yes, there's a lot of technology, but also celebrates imagination and narrative arts. So this is, there are 2 large museum projects in LA. One is a $1 billion expansion of LACMA with Zumthor, and which has a number of challenges, and then, of course, this privately funded museum by George Lucas and his wife, Melody. And I think both of them have the potential to have a massive impact on tourism in LA. And the brand equity, the brand value, the sort of business model also runs on a very interesting scale. The three others that are in a similar cluster is LACMA, the Peterson Automotive, and the Academy of Motion Pictures Museum that is coming up, which has been delayed so many times over. The planning process started 17 years ago, and there are cost overruns upwards of $200 million as on date. So that sort of gives you a sense of what this industry is about and the potential of this industry to galvanize economies and bring people together and inspire communities or nations to make changes, be it climate or be it business or be it cultural diplomacy or pure tourism. Be happy to take any questions. Yes, I mean, when you are in a crowded market where there are other art museums and so many private galleries to invest in another one, you're competing for the same sort of market share. And how much can the market sustain? There are companies that do those studies that kind of look at feasibility numbers, and obviously they must have seen something in investing in the creation of the Broad. And as you can see, it's been very successful. So, yes, sir.
Congratulations, first of all, on your pointing to the UN Environment and Climate Ocean Conservation as the chief advisor. Now, as the chief advisor, I imagine that you want to make the museums to be climate friendly, if you will. And I noticed that you had a couple of slides in there that were LEED certified. For the students that don't understand what LEED certification means, I think it's an important issue because it reduces the carbon footprint, and also, well, I'll let you explain.
So the question is about LEED certification. So the AI, pardon me?
LEED.
Yes, LEED. So it's an American standard that establishes energy efficiency in buildings. So there are different sort of categories of certification. There is LEED Silver, LEED Gold, LEED Platinum. LEED Platinum has two sets of connotations. One is completely off the grid. The second is on the grid, but compliant with LEED Platinum standards. The California Academy of Museums, that Teletubby-like building that you saw, is a LEED Platinum building, which means that it has to fulfill a massive checklist of commitments to recycling, to the use of materials, to sustainable practices, to adherence to sustainable development goals. It has to have a materiality that resonates with some of those requirements, and that can go into the granularity of something like vegetable dyes, the kind of chemicals you use on paints, the way the wood is treated before it is actually brought in as furniture, equipment, or props within the building. So every sort of supply chain can be drilled down into specifics of what would constitute as a truly sustainable building that adheres to a number of standards. And the use of electricity is primary. The use of recycled water is primary. So there are some baseline requirements, and there are finer requirements and more fine and sort of granularity of each of those streams. And that is what LEED standards connote. And the American Institute of Architects have kind of added some sort of tax connotations to incorporation of some of the LEED technologies. So depending on which state you're in, depending on what LEED certification level you're at, you get certain incentives for bringing in LEED standards to the construction process, to the sustainability process, to the maintenance process, and the life cycle costs of keeping these institutions sustainable. So that's what it is in a nutshell.
Just a quick question on that. When you say it's completely off the grid, like it's a self-sustained as far as energy goes, or?
The question is about being off the grid. The Eco Center Park at Heron's Head in San Francisco is the first LEED off-the-grid building in California. It is completely off the grid, including your toilets. Everything is off the grid. everything is recycled and reused in that location. So if you Google the Eco Center Park at Heron's Head, you will actually see this LEED Platinum building that is completely off the grid. So it's not hardwired to anything. So it's, you know, and it's a functional model that demonstrates that it's doable. And it's sustainable, it's low maintenance, and it kind of uses the natural elements, be it wind, be it sunlight, be it rainwater, be it vegetation, be it plantation of vegetables and fruits.
Out of all the projects you've done, which one's your favorite and why?
Which one is the favorite and why? No favorites, because it's very easy to get sort of dazzled by the numbers and the scale. There have been experiments where, despite all the money spent, the attraction is flat. So, for example, when Disney recently opened the Star Wars sort of the themed area, it fell flat. It opened with just one ride. You know, it has, you know, now they're saying that it'll open a second ride next year and so on and so forth. But the opening was flat. The experience was flat. The purpose of the institution is more important than the sort of packaging. So it's like if you have a spine, you have a brain kind of thing. You have to have the story which makes it relevant, and you have to make the story resonate with, you know, a diverse audience, and that's the measure of success. Not the ticket sales in year one or year two, the qualitative side of you know, what it does to you as a human being. I think that's the true measure of success, or how it inspires a generation of children to be plastic free, or to think about renewable sources of energy, or to wonder about and ponder on, you know, issues that will impact, you know, their sustenance down the line. So first project. So let's do a visual on it. So thank you for that young compliment, but I'm in my 50s, late 50s, and I've been in this business for 34 years. And in 34 years, I've worked on 108 projects, and this is the first one. So this was privately funded by a family in India, in Western India, about 200 miles west of New Delhi. And they are like the Rockefellers. They are industrialists with investment in textiles, heavy engineering, ball bearings, oil and natural gas, ceiling fans, you know, very diversified portfolio of businesses. And they took the taxable wealth and decided to educate younger people with science centers and planetariums, cancer research hospitals, small industry development research organizations, prototype building stations, and so on. So they started this process in the 1950s. So they, a very far-sighted sort of family. And to put that in perspective, Mr. Gandhi was assassinated in one of their temples. So they had interest in temples at one point, and then they said, well, more than temples, people need to be educated about science and you know, technology. So I kind of grew up in that environment, and when I graduated, this was the first job that I had. You know, this is the complex, and that's the Prime Minister of India at that time. And this had an observatory, a planetarium, a science museum, a convention center, and 10 units of research, all in one complex. And it was master planned jointly with the City of Science and Industry in Paris. So I was 22 when I went to do the master plan. And then when I came back and executed it, I became its director at 25. So that was fortuitous because it was not normal. So that sort of triggered my interest. So I ran this place for about 7 years. That's inside the planetarium, the theater space, and so on. And I saw the potential of what these attractions can do. The business model was that the convention center would bring in the money and would sustain the research associated with, it was applied research mostly, not fundamental, but applied research. And the planetarium ran about 12 shows a day. So 40 minutes a show, 12 shows a day. It was a very, very sort of busy place, and there's no dearth of population. So that's how I got into this field. like most Indian parents, the museum is low on the totem pole of, because employment is a big question mark. So I went to med school. And the first sight of the cadaver, I kind of collapsed. So I said, no more med school. And then I decided to focus on museums. But I eventually ended up doing a lot of medical exhibits. So I did an exhibit on 100 years of cardiac care at St. Mike's Hospital in Toronto. So everything from warm cardioplegia to pacemakers became part of that story. I did an exhibit for American Lung Association called Lung Express. So it's a gutted bus, it's like a walk through lung. And then I did an exhibit on infectious diseases for the National Institute of Health in DC. So you kind of find the topics that you kind of gravitate to. So I would definitely recommend the Peterson Automotive, primarily because, of course, they have a fabulous collection of cars. But what they did in terms of its business transformation, because you're all business students, the creation of this facade that looks like lubricant, engine lubricant, is the masterstroke. So it was a cuboid warehouse which had cars with a little bit of a concrete facade, if you look at the old photos of the Peterson. And then you look at the new one and what it has done to kind of galvanize the whole atmosphere, that is their success story. That's number one. Number two is the way they put $100 million into this new project without fundraising. They just went to a bank and said, here's a collateral, loan us, and we're off to the races, pun intended. So that's number one. The second I would recommend is a museum that celebrates ideas, be it human rights or emancipation from slavery or indigenous perspectives in post-colonial societies. Any institution that kind of celebrates an idea and a human desire for excellence, and how you tell that story where artifacts are not prime. It's a story of inspiration. So I think that is really important. And the third, of course, is anything where you learn more about your environment, be it association with the natural world, and where you come off asking certain questions of yourself as a human being, and asking questions as to how to become a better human being. So I think any institution that kind of creates that sort of energy within you is a successful institution. So it could be different things for different people. It could be culinary arts for somebody, or winemaking for somebody, or acting, or theater, or music. Those are all qualities, the 9 muses that make us human. I think that's the sort of the essence. So we are working on this climate museum, which is a complicated project unto itself. We have 23,000 animals in our care and 160 species. So we have to move all those animals to a secondary location with life support system. And the choreography of creating a building while we move the animals, while we meet our accreditation standards, that's a very complex task. So that's what I'm currently busy with. We have a satellite office in Jamaica. We are planning a museum in Jamaica. And we are also planning a floating sort of platform for climate. The first climate museum is in New York. But the kind of climate museum that we are planning is one of a kind, because it has, the one in New York is of a very different scale and a very different sort of storytelling mode. There's a lot of videography involved. And the way we are going to tell the story is going to be very immersive and very different. Well, most definitely yes, because the question is that whether this journey has made me culturally more sensitive and better as a human being. I hope better as a human being, but it does impact you, because you, first of all, cannot execute a project which is of a sensitive nature by being insensitive. You have to not just have the the ability to listen, but also you have to have the heart to resonate with what is being communicated. And because an imposition from outside is never accepted easily, you have to cultivate a team which owns the content. You don't own the content, but you can actually translate the content into an experience, and that becomes sort of the string that holds everything together. So to give you an example, how many of you heard of Derek Walcott? So Derek Walcott was a Caribbean poet, poet laureate, won the Nobel Prize for Poetry. And there are a number of museums that talk about post-colonial societies and how cultural imprints are either suppressed or carried forward in post-colonial societies, and how perspectives of telling stories, look at the same thing from different angles. But if you were to read some of his poems or a few lines from his poems, you would actually get the sliver, which is the mission statement of many, many museums that address this. So in one of his poems, he says, so the sun never set on the British Empire from Philippines to Falklands. It had 50 colonies. In one of his poems, it says, and I'm trying to think of the lines, I come from a land where the sun, tired of the empire, sets in the west. In setting so, it gives birth to 1,000 stars. I have the love of sea in me. I have a little bit of Dutch, nigger, and British in me. I can roll up the sleeves of my white shirt and bear the white scars on my brown skin. Either I'm a nation or I'm a nobody. So, that kind of captures the essence of a lot of museums that talk about the post-colonial angst. If you can be sensitive to something like that, then I think you have made some positive strides in becoming better as a person and doing justice to the task that you've been entrusted with to create something which is generational. So you have to set aside your business mind and focus on something that is greater than yourself. Right. So the question is about maintenance of an off-the-grid building. It's actually very low maintenance. So we used to run it with 2 volunteers. 2 volunteers. Yeah. It is certainly possible, but it's not super practical, especially with the toilets and with IT requirements. And you can't run a business that way unless you're plugged onto a wireless phone device. And so it has some issues there. But it's fairly cheap to maintain that. So the question is about the business model of museums and the reason why they are in different locations. Let me answer the second part first. Sometimes it's just a regulatory process which is so frustrating that a lot of businesses don't want to deal with over-regulated communities. So if it is easier to just establish something on an island with literally no regulatory imposition from neighborhood groups and communities and so on, then it becomes practical for them to just do it there. They have the real estate, they connect it with a causeway, make it a destination. So it's so fantastic that you would actually hop into a car or public transit to get there to look at it. The business model, that is a combination of commerce and it's a for-profit. It's a theme park, so it's a for-profit. But the business model for most museums as nonprofits or 501c3, at least in the United States, is that they have an endowment. Just like universities and community colleges have an endowment, the nonprofits, these museums, have an endowment. So the endowment sustains a rainy day, and the business model is based on your ticket revenues, sponsorships, restaurants, studio, and retail. So these 5 branches feed into the revenue stream, and the museum cuts its cloth according to how much money it has. So that's one way of looking at that business model. The for-profit museums like the Spy Museum and some of the museums in Vegas, you collect the money and you make sure that there's ample money to sustain the museum. And certain topics have that appeal. And that's why you have franchises like the Merlin Entertainment Group has Madame Tussauds or whatever else. I mean, they have that brand equity, which they know that by putting X amount of dollars, you know, C centers around the world, they all have similar business models. You know, you create a cookie cutter sort of experience, and you have a talent pool or a staff pool that you kind of, you know, distribute in different franchises. It's like a franchise operation. So there are different ways in which these nonprofits and for-profit museums sustain themselves. The question is, what was the most difficult museum project and what made it difficult? The project in Hawaii was difficult. Still is. The issues are very deep. The issues are very deep. Just like we have one navel, Hawaiians believe that they have three navels. So it's called Piko. So Piko, A, O, and E are the three navels. The umbilical cord of the firstborn Hawaiian son is cut and wrapped in tea leaves and put on Lake Waiao on Mauna Kea. So the connection is very visceral. Imposition of telescopes in that context, you have to have a different mindset to appreciate why the connection is so difficult, why the access is so difficult. Then you have to look at where is that common ground. The common ground is navigation. So they had their catamarans, they sailed from New Zealand to Rapa Nui to Hawaii and back and forth using their own star charts. So they had dead reckoning as well as, you know, they had their skills in navigation. While every European explorer sailed mostly around the coastlines, the Hawaiian navigators went smack in the middle of the Pacific. It's 2,500 nautical miles from one end to the other. And how do you get there and back like a ferrying taxi? You have to have that precision in terms of, you know, what you can execute. There is no sunscreen. There is no, you know, restaurant food. You're out in the open with the elements on a moving catamaran, which is a feat unto itself of, you know, human endurance. That's the common ground. How to bring that conversation and how to keep the conversation going for the right reasons was and is a challenge. There was a legal challenge because the annexation of Hawaii by the United States has never been accepted by some portions of the community, and there are challenges of the International Court of Justice in The Hague that challenges it. So there is the sovereign issue, there is an issue of access, there's an issue of sacred sites, there's an issue of compensation, there's an issue of cultural divide, there's a schism between lack of dialogue, then there is pride on top of it. So how do you bring all those facets as an outsider to bear on this process, and what is that solution? You have 64 lawsuits. In those days, that was about 15 years ago, there were 64 lawsuits. There are still additional lawsuits. And the lawsuits pertain to the expanded footprint of not just the super telescope, which is 30 meters in diameter, but also something which is known as an outrigger. So the keck, in very lay terms, is an interferometer. So what happens is that you have keck 1, keck 2, you have twin domes. The diameter of the domes and the virtual diameter in between the domes forms the actual diameter of an interferometer. If you add outriggers, that multiplies the diameter and the reach of that telescope. So it really is a super telescope by any standards. So that is number one. Number two is something which is called adaptive optics. So in very lay terms, you put a straw in a bottle. You know, if the light comes from a rarer medium to a denser medium, it bends towards the normal, and then it bends away from the normal. So that's the basic physics of refraction. Each time we get a beam of light from, let's say, a star, it is passing from rarer medium to denser medium to rarer medium to denser medium. And by the time you look at it, it appears to be twinkling because of that sort of shift. Adaptive optics applies millivolts of electricity underneath these wafer-thin mirrors to correct the aberration so that you get a clear dot. that has connotations with Star Wars, with laser warfare, with beam reflection, so on and so forth. So there are many forces at play. The stakes are high in that sense, with immediate applications of technology, and the stakes are very high for cultural sovereignty. So that makes it really complex as a ongoing process. So it's powered by solar panel. There is a photovoltaic storage system. So the excess power is stored into batteries, and batteries power the needs of some of the electrical needs of the building. The square footage is about 1,800 square feet. So it's a very small unit, but then it has some outdoor area associated with it. But thank you very much.